everyone, and welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. This is not a video about being prepared or economics or shitting the fan in any way. This probably goes into the conspiracy corner or the unknown. This is a story I've hinted at a few times. It's a story I've told to many people, and it happened while I was in high school. And I want to get this recorded for posterity's purpose. Right? I've never recorded it before. I've never had anyone else record it. Sometimes I use a storyboard to tell it, and sometimes I just stand up in front of a group and describe things. And so I've described this while camping with friends. I've described it while picnicking, while having parties, gatherings. During the holidays. I've told it a lot, and I've tried remaining as true to my recollections as possible. And this is the story of an exchange and an interaction that occurred. So I want to start by laying out the general idea, and I'm going to tell you guys basically right where it's at, right where this happened. Okay? There's a little town in Amador County called Volcano. Up here is Pioneer. Red Corral is the closest area, and it's an unincorporated area. And then down over here, relative to everything else, is Pine Grove. This is all in Amador County. This is all where I grew up. And it's the general area of where I lived before I moved to extreme Northern California. So there's a road that goes from Red Corral down to Volcano, and it's called Pioneer Volcano Road. And then there's another road called Pine Grove Volcano Road, all very original names. And running down into Volcano is Pioneer Creek, represented by this blue line. Pioneer Creek runs into Sutter Creek in Volcano, and then it goes down through another canyon down to Sutter Creek, the town of Sutter Creek. So I grew up in this area. A friend of mine, his name was KC. KC lived just off of Highway 88, just to the west of Red Corral. And he told me one day, and this was the sophomore year. It was the sophomore year in high school, but in summer, in August, before school started, going into my junior year. And KC says, "Hey John, I know there's some caves down in this area, down in the canyon. We should go down there, do some camping. We can go swimming at this little pond. We can hang out at the creek. We can have some fun." And we decided, okay, let's do it. So we put together our camping gear, some food, a tent, right? And we went down the canyon that went past his house. So we went down the canyon, and it's a hike, and it's about half a mile down. It's really not far off of the highway, but it becomes remote feeling very quickly. The canyon's very steep. There wasn't at the time a lot of things in it. So we go down the canyon about half a mile, and we make this turn. And we turn up and away from the creek. So this little red square here, and it's not perfectly to scale. In fact, it's hardly to scale at all. But I wanted this red square here to represent what I have here, which is a more detailed description of the campsite. So we come to the campsite, and at the time I thought this is a log landing because the road goes up to it, and it's a clearing. And it's about, we'll just say 40 feet across. It's not huge. It's not really big enough to be a log landing, because where would you turn trucks around and stack the logs and have skidders and all the equipment? So it was probably a home site, because there were homes up the canyon, and someone, chose not to build on it. But there's no power lines, there's no other homes in this area. And we thought this would be a great place. So we set up our camp, we set up a tent, and we had a small tarp, and we put all of our items out on it. Our light Coleman lantern, and then we had a cooler with our food in it. And we thought what we want to do is we want to go find these caves. Right? But Casey said it had been a long time since he went and found them. And so he didn't really know where to start. Anyways, we set up this camp, and it was interesting. There was a madrone tree here. And then coming off this backside was kind of a cliff. It was a drop. But all around us, we were in a big kind of a bowl. The mountain really was steep, and it really curved around. And so as we looked around, the hill always went up and away. But just behind us, it went down before it went back up. So it was really kind of a bowl feeling. So we set up our camp, and then somewhere around noon, we set out and said, let's go find these caves. And so we went down the road, and we said, let's start looking on the hillside. And we started to the west. And we went up and down the hill, back and forth, kind of systematically searching for these caves. And we searched and searched and searched and couldn't find them. We worked our way up the creek on the northern side of the canyon, and we finally found them in the late afternoon. It was late afternoon. I don't know if it was 4 o'clock, probably 4-ish, right? No watch, you're a kid, what do you care? It's summer, what do you care, right? And we found these caves. And it wasn't what I thought caves would be. It wasn't the side of a hill with the sheer granite face with a hole in it. It wasn't a mine like men had mined it. It was rather interesting limestone formations. There were some entries, some holes that went down into the ground. There were some that went kind of back and under crevices and then back into the mountain. Then there were some interesting fissures along the ground. It was a very strange looking kind of place. And I don't know if it was placer mined back when the 49ers were here, because this is a massive gold creek. If anyone's familiar with Sutter's Fort and then the Sutter Creek, Jackson, Sonora. If you go to the north, there's Placerville and then Auburn. All of these are gold towns. There's just tons of gold in these hills that was mined out, dredged out, or placer mined out. But this was an interesting area. It wasn't steep on the hill. When we finally found the caves, it was kind of a flattish area where the canyon came down, but it had a flat bottom, if memory serves me. But there were some oddities about this. There was an unusual feeling to being there. As a kid, you're fearless, right? I had my knife, and I didn't feel any threat from anything, so to speak. Normally, you're rather brave as a young person. You're not afraid of anything. You're ready to take things on. But there was just a weird feeling about these caves. And we went into them some. But as we went into the caves, an overwhelming sense of fear came over us. Came over me especially. I don't know about Casey, but I felt really weird. There's one that went down. And interestingly, past this junction, over towards Volcano, there's the Masonic Cave, which has a tunnel which goes down to an underground lake. And it's a visible underground lake. There's a boat in there that you could take across the lake. This had all been closed off years ago to keep people from getting hurt. But there's underground tunnels and cracks and fissures that lead from Volcano, I guess, all the way to Pine Grove. Came out on, I believe, Lupin Road. Anyways, it kind of had a weird, like, this goes down into something feel. At the time I did this, I didn't know about the lake under Volcano. I didn't know about that. It just had a weird feel to it. And some of the oddities, besides the strange feeling that brought a lot of fear, is there were big piles of fur. Big piles of crap and fur. Like someone took a rabbit and just tore it to pieces. Another thing was there was no sound of birds. And while this isn't completely unusual for the time that I've spent in the woods, there's time I've been in the woods when birds are making noises, and especially blue jays squawking and screaming. Seeing and hearing squirrels, other animals, running through the leaves. You could hear things. And then other days things would be quiet. And I've spent a lot of time in the woods. So this feeling I got was really kind of odd. It was oddly quiet. And you could look up in the trees, and there's a lot of oaks in that area. There's pines and oaks. And there's no birds. There was no wind to speak of. It was hot, but it wasn't uncomfortably hot. I know that as a kid you're more tolerant, but at the time it didn't seem to be any hotter or cooler than normal. But it was very still and very quiet. And then there was the odd crap, literal piles of crap, giant ones, and fur. And there were these caves, these cracks in the ground, caves. So we goofed around there for maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And then we said, hey, we need to get back to camp. And since now we had our bearings about us, we're going to go back to camp. And we thought, we're going to go down to the rock quarry tonight and goof off. So we came back, followed the creek down, past the cabin. There's a cabin down here at the bottom. And they took one of these wide areas, and they, at some point in history, dug out a pond so that Pioneer Creek would fill the pond, and then it'd go out, and it was kind of a little swimming recreation area. The road came down, and then it went across the creek through a ford, and then went back up and was heading towards Pioneer Volcano Road. So we came down the creek, past the cabin, joined the road, came back up the road, and made our way up to camp. Like I said, we decided, okay, let's do this. Maybe it was 6 o'clock at this point, maybe 7. We said, let's wait till it's a little darker or dark. We'll go down to the rock quarry and we'll goof off. This is what kids do, right? They want to goof off. So we came up, and it's a fairly straight trail, and it's grown over. It was a road at one point, probably wide enough, but now it's kind of grown over with a manzanita and buckbrush, whatever was growing. Nothing too bad, right? And then it went through some green brush. Surrounding the clearing was brush, bushes, fairly dense, thick bushes, and then this flat spot. So we made ourselves some dinner. I can't remember what we made, but I do remember we had a snack, and we thought, well, let's take we've been walking and hiking all day. Let's take a little break. So we laid down, just tried taking a nap, didn't get too far with that, and we decided, okay, let's leave. And we went back down, circled around, got to the creek, and then basically followed trails down the creek. Just guessing, it's somewhere about half a mile down. That's just a guess. I can't remember if there was a road that went or a trail. It wasn't really too far, or so far that it would make you not want to take the hike. Not too terribly difficult to do it in the dark. But, we did it. And I can't remember if we had one flashlight or two, or if we had a lot of moonlight, but it was a fairly fun trip down to the quarry. And I think there was moonlight, because in a rock quarry, everything's very gray. And there was equipment there, and we threw rocks at stuff and banged it off of steel, had a bunch of fun. Then we started making our way back. We thought, okay, we're tired, and now it's getting late. We're wondering if we're going to get in trouble. And this is not a heavily populated area. There's houses now. Pioneer Volcano Road, people have houses just off of the road. And then dropping down into this canyon, there's nothing really down in the canyon. Anyways, we still figured, we're going to get in trouble. So we came back up. We worked our way up the hill. We came up the final trail up to our camp. And this is when things started to go wrong. I came over, and we had a little stump, and we had set the Coleman lantern on it. And I took it, pumped it full, really good, a lot of pressure, took a match, lit it. and it lit the entire area really well. You know, you could see all the bushes around us, and here we are. Two young guys were camping, not too far from Casey's house, but, you know, half-mile down the canyon. We're on our own, we're tough guys, we're having some fun. This isn't like one of the hunting trips that I took way up into the Sierra Nevadas or to other reservoirs. This is fairly close to home, feeling fairly safe. So I lit the lantern, and I said, hey, Casey, let's cook some hot dogs. I think we were going to make a little fire and cook some hot dogs. And after just a couple of minutes after the light was lit, I just put some numbers on here. I heard a noise at position 1. It's an animal. I heard a noise. And if the tent is here, and the lantern's here, and the food is here, I'm looking over the shoulder, up the hill. It's a slope run up the hill, and about 50 feet away, I heard a noise. And I said, KC, there's an animal up there. And it didn't make any more noise. Somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds of nothing. I returned, went back down to start doing whatever I was going to do. And this time the noise got louder. It bothers me to tell this story. It makes my hair stand on end. It makes me very nervous to tell this story. It's scary to me still. So I'm going to do my best to remember everything in the order that it occurred. I heard the noise. About 5 or 10 seconds later, I returned to doing what I was doing, and then it made another noise. The second time. It was a kind of a auditory muffle, like a kind of a growl, but not a growl as like a wolf growl or a lion growl. It was rah, some kind of noise. And I told KC, I said, it's still up there. I bet it's a raccoon. What I based that on, maybe it was the volume of the noise, but I remember saying it must be a raccoon. Lots of raccoons in the area. And so I picked up my e-tool, which is the folding camp shovel. And I told KC, I'm going to scream and yell. I want you to help me yell, and we're going to scare the stupid thing off. Many times in my life, I've had animals come down to camp and want to, root around and get food. They're annoying, right? You don't want to get bit, and you don't want them to steal your shit. So at this point in my life, I knew if you just make a bunch of noise, things go away. So I say, KC, let's make some noise. And I pick up the e-tool, and I start swinging it like this, and I go, get the, we start cussing. Get out of here. Rah! Get. And that is when everything changed as far as who was in charge. Who was in charge of what was going on. When I started screaming and yelling and cussing, something bizarre happened. Up here on the hillside, out of direct light from the lantern, two things happened at once. This animal yelled with such ferocity, anger. You could hear the anger, the ferocity, the aggressiveness. It yelled, "Rah!" And as it did that, it barreled down the hill. If we were 20 foot from the edge where the light could show, it was another 20 feet on the other side of that. As it yelled, it started rushing towards us. And you could hear branches snapping. It sounded like all hell broke loose. This thing rushed down the hill at us. And so what any brave human being would do, we both turned, jumped into the tent, and zipped it up real fast. What would you do? And it wasn't just the volume and the anger and the aggressiveness of this animal, but you could feel its size. You could tell this is a large, massive animal. This is not something you can stand up to. That's how authoritative it was when it yelled. And it came right down to the edge of the light. Our tent door was facing number one. I call him number one. And it stood there at the edge of the clearing, in the bushes, and it yelled again. Ah! Very authoritatively. And then something else happened. Right next to it, in these bushes, surrounding this pad, this flat area, this thing did this. It clapped twice. The sound of the clap wasn't like my hands. I've got fairly large hands. But when they clapped together, it sounded like two catcher's mitts. Just a deep bass. Bam, bam. You could tell it was a clap. You could tell they were hands. Just really freaking big. And when this thing clapped, we heard, completely surrounding us, except for the cliffside, other creatures start to move. They took just a couple of steps. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. And then they'd stop. And then number one, who's right down here on the edge, yells again. Rah! But it's not a human yell. It is a wild, vicious animal, but it's got a human tone to it. Very human tone. But it is not human. It is incredibly wild. When I say wild, it is bone-chilling. It makes your hair stand on end. It scares the living shit out of you. So it would yell. And number two would again clap. And then 3, 4, 5, and 6 would move, and they would take. And it took several minutes for me to start hearing what was going on, because we're inside of a tent. The sun is down. We have a lantern right in front of the tent. So it's shadowing, it's blasting the tent with light, so we can't see out and past it. And it's fully pressurized, full of fuel, fully pressurized. It's nice and hot out. All of our food is out here, and this thing is yelling. And then the other one claps, and then you start hearing him walk, and you hear one crunch, 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 and then they stop. They stop. And I realize we're surrounded. And we're trapped inside of a tent. And what have I got? All I have is my knife. It's essentially a K-bar knife, old leather discs for the handle, old knife. That's all we have for protection. Casey's on the far side. I'm on the near side of the tent. And it's a little 6-foot, 2-man tent. And we're inside, and these things are outside. And obviously, we've been surrounded. Obviously, they followed us back from the caves. Must have been their home. They followed us back. They let us leave, and then they set up an ambush. I've shared this entire story, by the way, with Lauren Coleman, who is a cryptozoologist. He's a cryptid researcher. I contacted him back in the late 90s, and he acknowledged that I had a story about a strange encounter. I wrote the story down for him, sent it to him, and then he refused to communicate with me anymore. Because what I had to share is not like any other Bigfoot story that's ever been told that I know of. We found a place where they were living, where they were making a home. The signs and the evidence of that were the caves, the fur, and the fact that things were quiet. A lot of people have noted that when you run into a Bigfoot, right, it's a different kind of world. You get a different feeling from it. Now, what I never got was a sense of smell. Some people say their experience with Bigfoot is it's very smelly. The question is, could it have heard us coming? Yeah. Where was it when we were at their caves? I don't know. One story I've heard coming out of a guy, he was on TV. He was in Washington State. He and some relatives went berry picking. And he was walking on the trail back to the vehicle, and down out of a giant tree, I imagine either a pine or a sugar pine, some sort of big tree, a Bigfoot just came crashing out of the tree, landed in front of him, stood up, and was standing over the top of him, 8 or 9 foot tall. Guy freaked out and ran. It was the end of his story. So when I was up here in the caves, looking up, no birds, no sounds. No rustling. It's like the environment is taken over by these creatures. So here we are. It's somewhere 10, 11 o'clock at night. We're half a mile from Casey's house, and we've got an animal. At this point, I didn't think Bigfoot. We've got an animal pissed off. We got something else that can clap. We're completely surrounded, and there's a hierarchy. This one yells, number 2 claps, the others move. And Casey and I wanted to start communicating. We wanted to talk. We were trying to talk. What is happening? What the hell is that? What did we do? Why won't it go away? And every time we started to talk, number 1 would yell, "Rah!" Which was its way of saying, shut the fuck up. That's what it did. It would yell at us. Absolutely yell at us. We would stop. Number 2 would clap. And the others would move. And not only did they take a couple of steps, they seemed to curve around us as they walked, then they'd stop, and then they would come back. But every time they seemed to circle in closer and closer. I thought we were dead. I really did. Casey had asthma. I didn't. But these things would close. And I think what kept them at bay was the light. We dove in the tent. The light is still burning. And we're thinking it kept them at the edge of the light. They didn't want to come into the light. For what reason? I don't know. Did they not want us to see them? Well, obviously we knew they were there. Did they not want us to shoot them? Well, if they got too close and came into the light, yeah, we might have seen them. We might have shot them if we had guns, but we didn't. All I had was a knife. We weren't allowed to talk. We didn't have anything inside the tent other than blankets and my knife. Our shoes, this is interesting. Our shoes were outside on the tarp. We came back, feet were tired, took the shoes off, right? That's what you do. We dove in the tent, no shoes. This thing is yelling, and it's starting to have an effect on you. Rah! Right? The walking. Every time it would yell, it started to hurt because it would cause you to convulse and tighten so much that my muscles began to seize like a cramp, an all-over body cramp while this thing yelled. It was so loud and so vicious. And from the first time it yelled and charged at us to the last time I ever heard it, It never lost any volume. It never lost any intensity. It never lost any of the anger. You would think that something that yelled that loudly, that long, and by the time we were done, it was hours. By the time we were done, its voice should have been shot, but it wasn't. So we're laying there, and I let Casey know. I said, we should try and go to sleep. It hasn't attacked us yet, right? Maybe the lantern, which is still burning out here, will keep it away. It'll lose interest. It'll go away. And at this time, we're not thinking Bigfoot. We're not thinking Bigfoot. We just don't know what it is. So I'm curled up on this side of the tent. Casey's on the far side of the tent. My head is essentially right here. Right next to the tent wall. And I'm laying there huddling. And every time this thing yells, and it's every 30 seconds, if you're ready for the yell, it hurts. After half an hour or an hour of this getting yelled at and traumatized by this massive monster, it would make your muscles tighten, and my back started to hurt. It started to spasm. And if you were ready for it, it didn't matter if it surprised you or you were ready, it just hurt. Your muscles would tighten. You're just so fucking scared. And then as soon as it stopped yelling, you could relax again. But after doing this contraction and relaxing, and contraction and the terror, being terrorized by this animal, it wears you out. My back felt like it was going to snap. This thing was yelling. And I just told Casey, we need to pass out. We need to go to sleep. This thing will just go away. And we were able to convey that to each other. And I think I did pass out. Sometime in the middle of the night, around midnight, 1, I don't know, I passed out. What woke me up was actually worse than this thing yelling. What woke me up is it wasn't yelling any longer. Number 2 wasn't clapping any longer. None of them 20, 30 feet away from us were no longer walking around. That walk, crunch, crunch, crunch. You could hear them all, and you could count the footsteps. It was bipedal. It still didn't occur to me at this point that it's Bigfoot. It didn't occur to me that it's Bigfoot, and that's why it sounds like a human walking, but with really big feet. That's why it's able to communicate. It's smart. That's why there's the yell, then the clap, then the walk. There's a hierarchy. But all of a sudden, the yeller stopped. It just stopped. And then I realized why it had stopped. Right outside the tent, right next to the tent, behind my neck, which was about a foot from the wall of the tent, just on the other side, I could hear this thing breathing. Its throat, I swear, had to be this big around. The rush of air going in and out of its lungs was incredible. Absolutely terrifying to listen to. So here we were. We're prisoners inside of the tent. This thing has terrorized us. We've got cotton mouth, dry, can't breathe really well, scared to death, terrified, trapped inside of a tent, surrounded by animals, massive animals. They're screaming and walking in the brush. Have us surrounded. Pass out, generally from terror. And I'm awoken not by the scream of this thing, which could wake the dead. No, that's not. That's not what woke me up. It was the silence. The thing stopped yelling. I was against one side of the tent, about a foot away. I was curled up facing Casey across the tent, basically in the fetal position. And I all of a sudden realized why it was quiet. One of these things had crept down from the edge. And if you know what a madrone leaf is, it's about 4 inches by 6 inches. They fall off the tree. Trees in bloom year-round, or making leaves in year-round. They fall to the ground. They turn brown. They're big and crunchy. This creature worked its way down very carefully, silently, I might add. I didn't hear it getting closer. But it stopped right outside of the tent. And it started to breathe. And it could not breathe smoothly. Like you and I. We can breathe in and out. This thing could not breathe that way because either it was scared or it is just a massive, incredible beast of an animal. Its throat had to be huge because I could hear the massive volumes of air rushing into its lungs, which made me think it had to have a chest capacity. Like this animal was as big as a horse or bigger. I spent a lot of time around horses and feeling the amount of air they let in and out of their lungs, a horse. This had a bigger throat. And this is the best I can do to recreate the way this thing breathed. When it sucked in air, you could just hear volumes, and it took about 3 seconds for the air to go in. And then when it exhaled, it couldn't smoothly exhale. You could hear the air coming out of the lungs, through the throat, and out through its mouth. Took about that long. Then it would start to breathe in. And it was right behind me. I'm laying down, cuddling, fearing for my life. There is a vicious, giant, pissed off animal just outside the tent. Going around the tent is the light. So it's on the side of the tent, maybe in the light. I was so scared, there is no way at all I could have done anything. If this thing wanted, it could have jumped on the tent, ripped the tent open, kicked the tent, drugged the tent off with us in it, could have killed us. I didn't know what this thing was, for one. Two, I just knew it was huge and fucking pissed off. And it was my life. And it's right behind me. The tent wall is about a foot from my neck. And this thing is just on the other side of the tent. A mere 2 feet away at most. And if its mouth is on the ground, that means it's on the ground on its hands and knees. Huge. That's the noise it was making. And I'm terrified beyond understanding. And I reach over and I start kind of pawing at KC. And the light is coming in the tent door, and so we got some light in there. And I'm signaling for KC. It's right behind me is what I'm trying to let him know. Listen, you can hear it, right? And Casey goes, I hear something. And this fucking thing outside the tent goes, blah, 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 right? And it's trying to be quiet, but it can't be quiet. It's that big. When you're that close to it, it can't be quiet. And I don't know what happened. I don't know. There's blank spots in the story. I froze. I literally froze up. Paralyzed with fear. The most intense, insane fear you can imagine. And then the thing, to the best of my recollection, got up and bolted across between the light and the tent and took off. But it didn't make noise like the one that rushed down the hill, which was intentionally making a lot of noise and letting us know, how dare you? You be quiet. That's what it was saying. This thing took off. And it was all quiet. All quiet. And I don't know how much time elapsed because the absolute terror I was in. But number one decided to resume yelling again. Rah! This horrifying scream. Wild. Pissed off. Loud. Vicious. Animalistic but human. Wild but human. Intense. Followed by the number two clapper. And then all of them started walking again. And it did this. It yelled. And it hurt. It hurt so bad. In fact, my spine right now, my back hurts. I can just feel it tensing from this, thinking about it. It started this. And there was nothing we could do. I now knew that this thing was massive in size. It was aggressive. It communicated. There was a hierarchy. We were surrounded. We were half a mile from Casey's house. It was the middle of the night. There's no one around, no one to save us, nothing to do, no weapons with which to protect ourselves. My knife I knew was useless. I had no idea, no concept, no pretense about what to do with it. It's a toothpick, right? If this thing wanted to kill us, I'd be lucky to get a stab in before it ate me alive. And I passed out again. And at some point, I woke up. And the only difference was that number one had now moved around, was on the other side of the little depression below us, and was over here on this hillside, which put it about 100 feet away versus 30 feet. It was further away, but it started and it resumed its yelling again. Ah! Every 30 seconds. It was over here. And number two would clap. And then the others would walk around. Oh, I forgot to mention that after the one ran in front of the light, we decided, because it was quiet at that point, there was no yelling, I told KC, maybe the light is attracting them. We need to shut the light off. It was still burning. I don't know what time it is. I don't know how the lantern lasted that long. I just don't know. But unzipped the tent, reached out, pushed the light over, bam, it hit the ground, the mantles broke, zipped it up, went back inside. And that may have been when the yelling started again the first time. Anyways, at this point of the night, and I don't know what time it is, I've been terrorized, traumatized. This thing's yelling. We're scared to death. I don't have a watch or a flashlight. Everything's outside. This thing has now moved over here and has started yelling. And Casey finally snaps. He snaps. This is sometime before sunrise. And he says, John, I can't do this anymore. I gotta run, right? And this thing starts yelling, Rah! Right? Telling us to shut up. I go, dude, we've got no shoes. It's the middle of the night. If we go out there, these things are going to eat us. It's going to eat us alive. He's like, I don't care. I can't take any more of this. It's just, I can't take it anymore. I can't take it. I go, okay. Right? What am I going to do? I guess I could have tackled him, beat him up. Didn't have any rope to tie him up. Right? But I'm scared to death too. And I'm like, you're going to ditch me? He's like, I'm going to ditch you. Right? I'm going. You're going to come with me or not? And so I go, okay, we need to go out, get our shoes off the tarp, come back in, put them on, and then we're going to run for it. And I go, Casey, you've got asthma. He goes, I don't care. I'm gonna run. I go, I can't carry you. Right? And we're just having this little mini argument while this thing starts yelling. And what the hell? So I just agreed to it. What else am I going to do? I don't want to be left alone with these fucking things. Right? And I don't remember thinking this at the time, but in hindsight, I'm thinking, Casey's got asthma. I'm a super athlete. I can outrun him. They'll eat Casey and I can make it back. Right? I didn't think that at the time, but I thought it afterwards. You know, you don't have to outrun the bear that's chasing you. You just have to outrun the friend that you're with. Anyways, that situation actually happened. So we go out, get the shoes, bring them back in, and put them on. And I go, can you do this? Are you ready? And he's like, yeah, I can do it. I can make it. I can make it. And we start running. We get up and we go down the trail, and there's a tree, right? There's a little fork that goes this way, and in the middle of that fork is a damn tree with a bunch of branches sticking out. Casey runs smack dab into that fucking thing. Branches poke him in the chest. I think there's this thing following us, or things, right? Pick him up. Let's go, right? And we ran as far as around this corner. Not even an eighth of a mile. And he goes, okay, we're safe. I go, no, you don't get it, right? Whatever this thing is, that's no distance. And he walked and made me walk with him all the way back to his house. We got there. We're just starting to see the light as it comes across the Sierra Nevada mountains and kind of fills up the valley. You know, it was incredible. An incredible, horrifying, terrifying night. And I had to walk with Casey all the way back up, thinking these things were going to kill us at any second. They didn't. But this is not the end of the story. Oh, yeah. We decided that we were going to get some payback, that we would go back the next day and the next night. So we got back to Casey's house and got some sleep. And we decided, hey, we're going to get some payback. And we got back to my house and got my car. And we got some 22s. In fact, I still have the 22 I had back then. Casey got his. I believe his was a 7-shot semi-automatic. I had my 18-shot Marlin, Model 60 and 22 long rifle. And we went back. And we backed the car up this was a road, now it's basically a trail, backed up to where we could get in, and it wasn't choked down too tight. And all of this was still here. Right? The tent, the campsite, everything was still there. When we came back, we heard a noise up here on the hill, not right on the edge of the clearing, but up. And it was a very short, audible, muffled growl. Brah! And that was it. And I think I had a slingshot, and I shot a slingshot into there, you know. Really, what's that going to do? I don't know, but no more noise. That was it. And I said, what we need to do is we need to build a tree fort. And we need to wait for the sun to go down. And then when these things come back and try taking their positions, we'll shoot them. Right? So this is our plan. So we did all of that. And we waited, and we waited, and we're in the tree, and we're looking up at this kind of terrain. It's kind of like a bowl. The hill goes up too steep, and then there's just the edge, the top of the trees. And it's probably, I don't know, a couple 100 feet to the top. Tops? Nah, not even that. Maybe 100 feet. Just out and up, like a big frickin' bowl. And we're sitting in the tree fort. We've got drinks, I'm sure. I know that we had guns. And we're sitting there. And the sun is setting behind us. And we're watching the light come up the hillside as the sun goes down. And at a particular moment, I don't know what the signal was. But simultaneously, instantly, once again, all hell broke loose. And much like this one that ran down, number one, crashing through the brush so you could hear it. 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 separate areas. You could I imagine in my mind, even though I can't see it, just a tornado of activity of this thing running down the hill, running down, just crashing and knocking shit out of the way as it goes, kicking stuff. You could just hear all hell breaking loose. So, bam, 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 not aiming at anything because there's nothing to see. There's trees, cover, but there's leaves and shit. The whole hill is alive with activity, and we're being rushed. So I unload all 18 rounds. Casey does whatever he did. And I just said, let's get the hell out of here. We jumped out of the tree, ran down about 100 feet or so, got in the car, and drove back up out of this canyon. That was it. We're done, right? This is a fucking mistake, trying to do that. We never saw anything. Never saw anything. Went and got my friend Pat in the week, and I told him the story. I told him everything I've told you. Everything that was done, where we went, the times, everything. And Pat was an incredibly smartastic skeptic. And he said, hey, okay, well, why don't we go camping, and we'll see if it comes back. Well, we never went back to the caves a second time. Right? So the next weekend we're there, and we've got a bigger tent now. Right? We put all the small stuff away. We had a bigger tent because there are now 3 of us. And it was a Friday night. School had just started. We told the story to friends at school, and nobody really believed us because, friends, high school, right? But Pat came back, and I said, look, I've got to work tomorrow. And they're like, well, we want to go swimming Saturday. We want to go swimming Saturday. I go, well, I've got to work. So we stayed up all night till who knows what time, 10, 11, 12. I don't know when we finally passed out. Nothing happened. We were inside the tent. One time, Pat got up over the top of us, did that and scared the shit out of KC. And but that was it. No Bigfoot. So they turned. We left camp. They turned and went down, and we're heading to go swimming. I came this way and had to walk out. My car was parked up at KC's. I had to walk out, and I got to about here. Right here. So this was a mountain, the ridge top, kind of like I've got drawn here. And I got around the bend, and I heard up on the hillside, about 30, maybe 40 tops feet up on the hill. Again, heavy, heavy brush. Can't see. It's like a wall of foliage. You can't see in it, but you can hear it. And I heard something walking, and it was pacing me. As I walked, it walked crunch, crunch, crunch. And I stopped, and it would stop. Then I would start walking again, and it would start walking. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Now the difference, this is one of the interesting things. When I was at the caves, it was a feeling of dread. When the things that surrounded us, it was a feeling of terror and dread. This was just being scared. There's only one of them. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't moving fast. It wasn't growling. It made no noise. It had a completely different feel. But I still remembered the terror I had experienced. And I just thought, I'm getting the hell out of here. And I did run all the way back up this canyon, got in my car, went to work. Right? Now, I got a phone call, though, the next day from Casey or Pat. I can't remember which. It may have been both. They came back and they said, what did you do that for? I said, what are you talking about? They said, you know what you did. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, but I did hear something in the bushes, and it was right around the corner, and they told me that in the road there was a giant Bigfoot print. And that's when we knew for absolutely sure this was a Bigfoot. This whole incident was a Bigfoot incident. And I figure that it must have come off of the hill when I ran and stepped in the road and left a big footprint in the middle of the road. Wasn't a time, we didn't have cameras back then, no phones with cameras, you couldn't take a picture. That was it. And from that point on, from this story, and there's one more Bigfoot episode that happened the next summer, but it didn't happen here, it happened up at Bear River Reservoir. That was a strange incident as well. And it involved a campsite that was abandoned that's usually full. And something started throwing boulders at us in the middle of the night. big rocks, 4 to 6 inches around, and it was about, I don't know how far away, but the rocks would hit about 20 feet short of the tent and then roll up on us. I discovered later that's pretty much a Bigfoot thing. Except my response at this point was I had a shotgun with me and I let off shot, bam, 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 in the general direction. Me and another friend named Vince, picked everything up, rolled it up, the whole tent and everything, and threw it in the back of the car. Popped the hatchback, threw it in, slammed the hatchback, and went home in the middle of the night. Midnight, 1 o'clock, whatever time it was, just gone. That was the second Bigfoot incident. That was it, you know. But this is what we've got. I've got a story. It's unusual. It involves an animal that's very intelligent. An animal that's territorial. That's understandable. But one that thought to follow us, set up an ambush. It thought it's coming back. It knew we were coming back as we left our stuff. It scared us. It kept us hostage. It terrorized the living shit out of us. But it wasn't going to harm us. I didn't do anything, I guess, that required it to kill us. Right? We just walked around in its house. It let us go without putting physical harm to us. And it came back, one of them, the next day to watch us. And then that evening, it wanted to let us know to leave. It did not like us at all. Leave, and we just got the hell out of there. The next week we came back, not the whole group, but the one was just watching, just observing. But by walking just a few feet away from me, and then stopping when I stopped and walking when I walked, it was letting me know it was there. If it wanted, it could have been silent, and I could have walked on by and it wouldn't have mattered. But this thing wanted me to know. Bigfoot is an intelligent creature. It did not communicate, but it certainly had a human tone to its yell. I don't know if it has the hyoid bone and it can speak or not. I've heard some people say it has a very, and I've met a lot of people now, having spoken of my story over the years, a lot of people who have told me their experiences in Canada, in the Sierra Nevadas. Lots of people, way more people than you know. Up in extreme Northern California, you bet there's Bigfoot stories up here as well. People don't go around telling because of the stigma of telling the story they have. Whether it's a visual sighting or something audible they heard, or evidence, you know, some sort of evidence of their campsite, things being thrown at them, they don't typically want to share, right, because of ridicule. Personally, I don't give a shit. I want this story to be known. Bigfoot is smart. It is social. It communicates. It has hierarchy. It can plan. And it can understand behavior of other creatures, humans. And it knew to come back, and it knew to follow, and it understood these things. It's a fascinating story. I swore I would never go back to the caves, and I never have been. I've thought that if a real Bigfoot researcher wanted to do that, I would take them back and show them this area and show them all of this in the caves. Right? It's an incredible story and life experience. And I've experienced a lot of weird shit in the Marines. I experienced a lot of weird shit in life. A lot of you guys have found UFOs in the videos that I do in the background. I've had a lot of people go, oh yeah, the one went over your shoulder, and I've seen the video. You guys have clipped them out and sent it to me. It's incredible. Life is full of incredible mysteries. The world is not what we say or think it is just because we want to believe. Right? Whether we're talking about ghosts or Bigfoot, or predator hunters, or other cryptids, the Loch Ness Monster, Tahoe Tessie, which is, you know, several hours from me, but down in Tahoe. It's an incredible world, full of the paranormal, UFOs and aliens and interdimensional beings and time travel. We have all of this fantastic stuff out there. And I've experienced, in a few cases, some of this mystery. And if I've experienced it and I know it's real, then I can't discount those other things that are out there. Right? You can't discount these other facts or other people's claims of fact, because I myself have had some strange and bizarre. Bears don't do this. Mountain lions don't do this. There are no other animals in North America. The only one that could be close to being big enough would be a bear. And bears don't do what happened. They just don't. The following weekend, one of the news channels out of the Central Valley, I believe it was Channel 3 out of Sacramento, said that down in Sonora, which was south of where we were at, some men were camping. And they had their Jeeps and their campsite, and they said up on the ridge, on the hill, a Bigfoot came out and it yelled at them. And the guy described the yell very similar to how I describe it. He says it was wild and human, but very loud. He said the thing yelled at him a couple of times and then it left. Was this the same group of Bigfoot that were migrating up and down? I don't know. But it certainly convinced me that what I heard was Bigfoot. What I experienced was Bigfoot. And it's a wholly unique experience. There are reports of people saying they've seen small Bigfoots like babies or adolescents with the adults. People that have been hurt have been rescued by Bigfoot and cared for by Bigfoot. I believe it's an ancient hominid that still exists today. I don't know or think it's Gigantopithecus, but it might be. I've heard that theory. I don't know for sure. I just know that based on what I experienced, it is very real. And it is much smarter than anyone gives it credit for. And for that reason, I believe that, yeah, when they die, they don't leave their bones around for people to find. I don't know what they do with them, whether they take them down into their caves and hide them. I don't know. But you're not going to find a Bigfoot out there. You're just not going to find a dead one. I've heard of people shooting at them and that didn't stop and kill them. Nobody has shot one or been able to yet, and I hope they don't. But I do hope that we have evidence. The Patterson Film is one of the greatest films of all time. It shows a female Bigfoot. It shows a leg injury, which would account for why it didn't run away, but it rather walked. The proportions from ankle to knee to hip, from hip to shoulder, the way that beast moved, the way its neck moved in the Patterson Film, it wasn't human and couldn't be duplicated by humans. I've seen many people in Bigfoot suits on TV, on the internet, and you can tell instantly that's a man in a Bigfoot suit. The Patterson Film shows something that's not human. What I experienced was not human. Bigfoot is real. And I don't recommend anyone hunts it without a great deal of respect for nature in the wild as well as the animal itself. It is very real. Thank you guys for watching this. I hope it was entertaining and informative. I hope you enjoy it. Pass it around if you want to other people who are interested in Bigfoot. And, maybe someday I'll go back. But it needs to be with some professionals. Yeah. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. Be cool.